They called him the Collector. Not because of the way he hunted, but because of what he left behind, and what he kept. In the sleepy suburb of Maple Hollow, where the streets were lined with elm trees and children biked home before the streetlights flickered on, something terrible had taken root. A shadow that no one saw coming. A monster disguised as a man. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to this channel. What you're about to hear is a story of trust broken, innocence shattered, and the horrifying truth that hid behind an ordinary face. You'll want to watch till the very end, because nothing in this tale is what it seems. It began, as it often does, with someone who vanished quietly. It was a rainy Thursday evening in October when 24-year-old Alice Donnelly never made it home from work. A florist by day and amateur poet by night, Alice was loved for her gentleness, always the first to comfort a crying child in her shop, always carrying dog treats in her coat pocket for the strays on the street. When she didn't show up to dinner at her sister's that night, her family grew uneasy. When she didn't answer her phone the next morning, they grew afraid. By the weekend, her picture was plastered across telephone poles. The local police said they were investigating, but there were no witnesses, no signs of a struggle. Alice had simply vanished. 2 weeks later, the town reeled as another woman, 27-year-old medical student Jamie Roth, failed to return from a morning jog along the Riverside Trail. Again, no trace, no sign of foul play. Her phone, her keys, even her water bottle, still inside her locked apartment. It wasn't until a hunter found a shoe deep in the woods north of town that investigators began to connect the dots. The shoe, covered in moss and soil, was confirmed to be Alice's. But the DNA under the sole? It belonged to someone else. Someone who, at the time, wasn't even in the system. That was the first real clue. Detective Carla Moreno had seen a lot in her 15 years on the force, but something about this case disturbed her in ways she couldn't quite name. The disappearances were too clean. The women too randomly chosen. There was no signature, no obvious pattern, until she remembered the name Erica Sims. Erica had vanished 9 years earlier under near-identical circumstances. A junior in college, gone without a trace. The only commonality between the women? All three had been patients at the same small private clinic on Briar Street. The clinic was run by Dr. Marcus Lyle, a soft-spoken, silver-haired physician with a kind face and a wall full of community service awards. He'd practiced in Maple Hollow for over 25 years. Respected, trusted, loved even. When Moreno and her team visited the clinic, Lyle greeted them personally. He seemed unfazed by the questioning, calm even, sipping tea from a porcelain cup. There were no red flags, no shaky hands, no breaks in his carefully measured voice. But behind his neatly stacked books and polished diplomas, hidden in a locked drawer beneath the patient files, they found something chilling: a locket. Inside was a photo of Alice Donnelly, smiling beneath a cherry blossom tree. The same photo her sister had given police. On the back, in small scrawled handwriting, March 2023, the sweet one. When Moreno confronted Lyle, he merely raised an eyebrow. That could have come from anywhere, he said. But they found more. In the basement of his home, concealed behind a false panel in the wall, investigators uncovered a hidden room. No windows. Just a single overhead bulb and a row of wooden cabinets. Inside each cabinet, painstakingly labeled, were items that didn't belong to any man who lived alone. A scarf, a bracelet, a blood-stained journal, a pair of ballet flats. Each item had a name and a date. Each name corresponded with a woman who'd vanished in the last 10 years. Some were never even linked to Maple Hollow before. All the trophies were neatly stored, preserved as if part of a private museum. Detective Moreno felt her stomach turn when she found the music box. It played Swan Lake. And inside twirled a ballerina, its base engraved with the initials AD. Alice Donnelly. The town erupted in horror as the news broke. Dr. Lyle, the man who delivered babies, cared for the elderly, donated to youth sports, had been hiding something grotesque. But the biggest shock hadn't even come yet. Because when investigators tried to match DNA from the trophies to Lyle, there was no match. Not on the locket. Not on the journal. Not on the scarf. It wasn't him. Yet Lyle knew intimate details, things only someone involved in the crimes could know. He described the bruises on Jamie's wrist. The ring Alice always wore on her middle finger. He recounted Erica's last words. So why wasn't his DNA anywhere? When pressed, Lyle gave a cold, cryptic smile. They trusted me, he said. Just like he did. Someone else? Was there a second person involved? That question would haunt the investigators for weeks. That is, until one of Lyle's therapy patients came forward. A 19-year-old boy named Nathan who had been referred for anger issues. He claimed Lyle had guided him through his darkest thoughts, that they had worked through fantasies using visual aids. When asked to elaborate, Nathan broke down. He said Lyle encouraged him to draw his dreams, violent, disturbing sketches of women bound and broken. When detectives searched Nathan's dorm, they found dozens of them. And beneath his bed, a velvet pouch containing earrings, one of which matched the set worn by Jamie Roth in a photo taken just days before her disappearance. But again, Nathan's DNA didn't match the evidence either. Two men, connected by therapy, connected by trophies, and still no DNA match. The question remained, who was the killer? And who was the collector? Or, were they the same person playing different parts? Just when detectives thought they'd hit a dead end, Moreno received a plain envelope at the station. No return address. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed a woman's hand, fingers curled slightly, resting on a bed of leaves. Taped to the back was a message. You missed one. And with that, the case spiraled into something far darker than anyone could imagine. Because whoever had sent the photo was still out there, watching, waiting, and he had just claimed another victim. Rain battered the windshield of the police cruiser as it crawled up the narrow gravel road that led to the childhood home of Leonard Graves. What they found behind those rotting wood walls would turn the stomachs of even the most seasoned detectives. Down in the basement, beneath a layer of dust and cobwebs, was a rusted metal chest. Inside, locks of hair, jewelry, dried flowers, and worse, one envelope for each victim, neatly labeled by initials and date. Each envelope held something personal. A ring, a blood-stained ribbon, a hospital bracelet. Detective Mallory didn't speak. He couldn't. He just stared at the initials on one of the envelopes, SW, and realized they belonged to a girl who had been missing for nearly 14 years. She was just 16 when she vanished walking home from school. Her case had gone cold years ago. Graves had kept a part of her, all this time. Meanwhile, forensic teams unearthed bones from shallow graves nearby. Human remains, some intact, others scattered. The soil itself seemed to whisper secrets, as if it had absorbed the screams no one heard. The public reeled when the news broke. Quiet grounds of horror, one headline read. Another called him, the collector. But as horrifying as the discovery was, the real question remained, how had Leonard Graves evaded justice for so long? It was a question that gnawed at lead investigator Sarah Mallory. She dug deeper into Graves' background. There were no violent crimes on his record. No red flags. Just a string of petty infractions. Trespassing, a few restraining orders. Nothing that screamed serial killer. But then she uncovered something chilling. Graves had applied to work at 5 different funeral homes between 2001 and 2010. He was never officially hired, but one small-town director in Illinois remembered him vividly. Odd guy, the man recalled. Asked strange questions. Wanted to know how we disposed of unclaimed remains. Sarah's stomach turned. She requested employment records and compared them to missing person reports. 2 names overlapped. 2 more women who had vanished, near towns where Leonard had tried to insert himself into the quietest corners of death. The psychological profile became darker. Graves wasn't just killing. He was preserving moments, trapping time in his twisted ritual. Experts concluded he didn't kill for power or pleasure alone. He killed to possess. Each token taken was a way to freeze the victim in time, to keep them from ever leaving. But then came a breakthrough. DNA from one of the trophies, a single speck of blood on a ribbon, didn't match any known victims. That meant there was someone else. Someone recent. Someone who might still be alive. Back in the evidence room, a police tech reviewing Leonard's seized hard drive came across a corrupted video file. After hours of reconstruction, they recovered the first minute. The screen was dark. Then the image flickered to life. The room, dimly lit. Pale blue wallpaper. A woman, bound at the wrists, was staring at the camera, eyes wide with terror, lips trembling. She whispered something. Please, he said. I'm next. The footage ended. The timestamp? Only 18 days before Leonard's arrest. Panic surged. Had they missed a live victim? Detective Mallory raced against time. Using metadata, they triangulated the possible location where the video had been filmed, a small, long-abandoned motel on the edge of the county line. Graves had once worked there as a handyman under a false name. The team moved fast. They reached the site by dawn. The motel was a husk of mold and rot, vines gripping the frame like a noose. Room after room yielded nothing, until they reached number 8. Behind the false wall in the closet, they found her. Emaciated, eyes sunken, barely conscious, but she was alive. Her name was Emily Rains, a 22-year-old nursing student who had been reported missing just 3 weeks earlier. She had been drugged and kept in darkness, surviving on crackers and sips of water. The first thing she said when they lifted her out was, "He said I was special, not like the others." Emily became the only known survivor of Leonard Graves. She would reveal terrifying details. Details the police had never imagined. How he watched victims for months, studied them, imitated their families to gain trust. How he selected specific dates to kill, aligning them with personal events from his childhood. A calendar of anniversaries no one else understood. But there was one thing she said that chilled investigators more than anything. "He always talked to someone when he thought I was asleep. Someone he called mother." Detectives thought it was a delusion, a fragment of psychosis perhaps, until they searched the attic of Graves' home again. There, in a rocking chair facing a cracked mirror, was a full-size female mannequin, dressed in a faded blue gown. A lock of Leonard's own baby hair pinned to its chest. Emily's escape was a miracle, but it brought with it a question more disturbing than any before. Was Leonard Graves truly working alone, or was there someone else, someone still out there, pulling the strings? Because on his final night in custody before Leonard was found dead in his cell from a mysterious overdose, he had scribbled one final sentence in his journal. It had been 2 weeks since Emily Rains was rescued. She barely slept. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the same image, flickering candlelight, a tall silhouette whispering behind the door, and that awful voice Leonard used when he spoke to Mother. But Emily insisted the second voice was not his. The police weren't convinced. They believed Leonard Graves had suffered from dissociative delusions, creating an alter ego to justify his horrific actions. Until the evidence said otherwise. It started with the autopsy. Leonard's death was officially ruled a suicide, an overdose of sedatives smuggled into his cell. But the toxicology report revealed something odd. The dose was too precise. Administered intravenously. Leonard had no access to needles. No puncture wounds from drug use existed prior to his death. And the security footage for the 48 hours before his death? It looked less like suicide, and more like silencing. Detective Sarah Mallory felt it in her bones. Leonard was covering for someone. But who? She dug back into his childhood records. Psychiatric notes from his youth. Foster care reports. Medical files. Then she found it. A single redacted name, listed under a psychological evaluation from 1991. Margaret E. Langley. Listed as a temporary guardian. The address? A decrepit farmhouse on the outskirts of Del Oro County. It had been vacant for years, until someone paid the back taxes 6 months before Leonard's arrest. Mallory went alone. The farmhouse stood like a skeleton in the dusk, windows boarded, the air thick with mildew and memory. As she stepped inside, the floorboards creaked like a warning. Old photographs still clung to the walls, children in grayscale, eyes hollow, smiles wrong. In the back room, a rocking chair, facing a dusty crib. And in the corner, a sewing mannequin dressed in blue silk, identical to the one found in Leonard's attic. Its hands were covered in children's gloves, stitched together. On its chest, pinned like a brooch, was a photograph. Young Leonard. And next to him, a woman with sharp eyes and a crooked smile. Margaret Langley. Margaret Langley had adopted Leonard temporarily at age 9 after his mother was institutionalized. During those years, several neighborhood children disappeared. The investigations led nowhere. Margaret was considered eccentric, but harmless. Until now. Mallory's team uncovered bank deposits tied to Margaret's old alias. Payments from unknown sources. An entire ledger of victims' initials, names that matched women now confirmed to be Leonard's targets. It wasn't just a coincidence. Margaret had trained Leonard, not just to kill, but to collect. Emily Rains' nightmares started making sense. She remembered a woman's voice, not just Leonard's. Calm, stern, reciting Bible verses, whispering things like, "Make them beautiful forever." She told him what to do, Emily said in a trembling voice, and he always obeyed. Authorities issued a warrant for Margaret Langley's arrest, but she was already gone. The farmhouse was empty, save for a wall covered in news clippings about Leonard's arrest. And one chilling photograph taken in secret. Emily Rains tied in the motel room, but Margaret's reflection visible in the mirror. She'd been there all along. The truth was darker than anyone feared. Leonard wasn't the only killer. He was the creation of something far more sinister. A woman who turned murder into ritual. A mentor. A mother. A monster. And now she had vanished into the wind. Months later, a package arrived at Detective Mallory's office. No return address. Inside was a hand-sewn doll. It wore a tiny blue dress. Tied around its neck, a locket. Inside the locket? A recent photo of Emily Rains smiling nervously at a press event. Mallory dropped it. There was a note folded neatly underneath the doll. In cursive script. We only collect the ones who shine. But is it truly over? Because sometimes, monsters don't work alone. Sometimes, they teach others how to hunt. Subscribe to True Crime Scene, because next time, we investigate the case of The Family Next Door, A Nightmare Behind the White Picket Fence.